Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's telephone town hall with Congresswoman Emily Randall. My name is Robin, and I'll be moderating this evening's event. This is a live, interactive forum, and we'd love to hear from you this evening. During tonight's call, we'll be taking as many questions as we possibly.
The Access Live event is in music hold. Music hold ended.
If
The Access Live event is in music hold. Music hold ended. The Access Live event is in music hold. Music hold ended.
If you would like to ask the Congresswoman a question this evening, please press *3 on your telephone keypad now. You may also sign up for Congresswoman Randall's e-newsletter by pressing *6 at any time during this call. If you're streaming this event this evening, simply type your name and question below the streaming player. Again, if you would like to ask a question this evening, please press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time during the call. You'll be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. That staff member will take down your name and your question. The next time you hear your name, it'll be me inviting you to ask your question directly to Congresswoman Randall. And remember, press *3 if you'd like to subscribe to her newsletter. You may also subscribe to the Congresswoman's e-newsletter online at randall.house.gov. And now, without further delay, I'd like to turn the call over to Congresswoman Emily Randall. Congresswoman, you are live, and the floor is yours, ma'am.
Hi there. I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I know that you could do a lot of things with your evening, and it means a lot that our constituents are so engaged in your community and in the government process. As many of you know, I've been in Congress now for around 9 months, and it's been quite a wild time to enter federal office. And it can sometimes feel easy to get bogged down in the chaos. But I want to start us off by reflecting on how proud I am of our team and the work that our office has been able to do for constituents around the district. We have hosted 13 in-person town halls, or 12 in-person town halls, and this is our second teletown hall, so 15 town halls. We're in every county every week that we're back in the district, and I travel home almost every weekend to ensure that we're as present as possible. My staff have been setting up casework connections opportunities. Our 3 casework member team has been engaging with constituents who need help with federal agencies. And through their hard work and connections and referrals from community, they've returned, as of Monday, $4,072,973 to taxpayers, to residents of the 6th District, whether that's VA benefits or Social Security, IRS, or other federal casework. They're showing up and working hard for you. And I'm grateful that you keep referring your friends and neighbors who need help with federal agencies to us so that we can be impactful. When I am home, as I mentioned, we travel around Pierce County, Kitsap, Clallam, Jefferson, Grays Harbor, Mason County, to stay engaged, to meet people where they are, and to hear concerns and figure out how we can fight together to solve problems. And that's what government should do. That's what our neighbors expect. Our neighbors expect elected officials to show up in DC to work as hard for everyday people as you all are working for your families. And this week, I came back to DC where votes were originally scheduled, but Republican Speaker Mike Johnson canceled votes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We didn't have any business before the House, and almost no Republicans from the House of Representatives showed up in DC this week. And that's really frustrating to me because while the House did have an opportunity to vote on the Republican spending bill that um, also known as a continuing resolution that could have kept the government open, they wrote that bill without consulting or negotiating with the Democrats in the Senate that would be needed to get a vote across the finish line. And that meant that they shouldn't have been surprised by the fact that Democrats weren't willing to vote for a bill that continued to gut healthcare dramatically after the significant cuts that we saw in July. I thought the Republicans in the House might come back because if the Senate negotiated a open the premium tax credits that will protect healthcare for all of us. So that's where my head's at today and this week. And I want to leave as much room as possible to answer your questions and to hear what's on your mind. So with that, I'll pass it back to the moderator. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Your first question comes from Heather of Washington. Heather, you are live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, hello. I'm from Aberdeen, and thank you for having these phone calls. It's just wonderful to be able to talk to you. My question is, and I don't think it will affect it, but how will the government shutdown affect Social Security payments?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Heather. We were at a Social Security office just last Friday talking with workers, and what we heard from some of the folks who have worked there for a long time is that their staffing levels are at a pretty record low right now. And that's dangerous, and it's not the kind of policy that I support. But even with those bare bones staffing levels, what we've heard is that benefit payments won't be affected, but that other services, appeals, etc., might experience delays. Many Social Security Administration employees have already been furloughed. That's that short staffing level. They're seeing customer service reduced. But as I mentioned, casework at the top of the call, if you have challenges with your Social Security payment, if you experience a delay, if you have questions, you can reach out to our casework staff and they can help you navigate your Social Security challenges. And that form to fill out to apply for casework is at randall.house.gov and help with a federal agency, and we'll be able to help you. So please feel free to pass on that information to your House Democrats are pretty united in ensuring that we are holding out for a deal that actually cancels the dangerous cuts, lowers costs for families trying to afford their health care, and protects healthcare for all of us. I have spoken just today and multiple times over the last week or so with Senator Murray and her team and Senator Cantwell, and they're holding strong. Today, the Senate voted on both the Democratic proposal and the Republican proposal, and the Senate vote was the same today as it was yesterday. It seems that Senate Democrats are holding strong as well. And we heard that Leader Thune from the Senate Republicans is interested in speaking with Chuck Schumer in the coming days. And we'll see that when it happens. But, every Democrat I talk to is standing strong and united to ensure that we don't let any further attacks on healthcare for real people, for everyday Americans, ravage our communities, rural communities like ours, where, we know what it means to have to drive an extra hour and a half on, around the peninsula in order to access healthcare if one clinic or hospital closes. rural communities across the country, and folks in cities too deserve access to healthcare, and we're going to fight for it.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Carla of Sequin. Carla, you're live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead.
Congresswoman, it is my honor to be able to speak to you tonight. We are concerned, several of us here in this building are concerned with what's going to happen to our Medicare and Medicaid because we rely on it. And I also have the question of, are we going to be paid our Social Security benefits for the month of October? That's really crucially important because we depend on that as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Carla from Squim. I worry too about Medicaid. I think a lot of our neighbors have heard me talk about Medicaid being the real impetus for me to get into politics and policy. And I often say that I'm a Democrat because of Medicaid, because Medicaid expansion in Washington state in 1993 saved my sister's life, along with so many Washingtonians. And continued Medicaid expansion, whether it's postpartum Medicaid, whether it's adult dental, whether it's other Medicaid programs for unqualified immigrants that are funded in Washington state only by state dollars, whether it's Medicaid coverage for reproductive health care for folks who were struggling to qualify. These expansions save people's lives, but they also ensure that hospital and health clinics in communities with high poverty levels are able to keep their doors open, because there are hospitals in our community where well over 50% of the patients who go through those doors and access treatment are covered by Medicaid or Medicare. And so dramatic cuts to federally funded health programs mean that those hospitals aren't able to count on those payments. And that is really dangerous for all of us, because even if you don't qualify for Medicaid, or if you don't qualify for an Affordable Care Act enhanced premium tax credit, you depend on your hospital or health clinic staying open and being able to take your private insurance, or, if you're paying out of pocket, if you're able to pay for your surgery that way, you can only pay for a surgery if you have a hospital to have it at. And I think Medicare is something that we don't talk about a lot around this fight, but is at risk. So this shutdown means that folks who were using telehealth with their Medicare coverage are no longer able to do that. There is no current Medicare telehealth coverage in this shutdown. And because of the cuts that Republicans made to H.R. 1, when they cut Medicaid, the biggest cut to Medicaid that our country has ever seen, and gave tax breaks to billionaires, the PAYGO formula. So if you pass a bill, you have to pay for it. And since the amount of cuts to Medicaid didn't equal the amount of tax breaks that the Republicans gave to billionaires, when we hit a certain point, there will be $500 billion in Medicare cuts. And that's because that H.R. 1 added $3.4 trillion to the deficit. And so I think Medicare is definitely at risk. I would love to be able to give you some reassuring words, like, don't worry, they are not going to actually cut Medicare. But in these last 9 months, anything that I have been worried that might be cut has been cut and attacked. And I'm worried about our healthcare right now. And that's why my fellow Democrats and I are standing strong.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And folks, once again, I want to remind you, if you would like to ask a question this evening, please press *3 on your telephone keypad now. And if you'd like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's e-newsletter, press *6. Congresswoman, next question comes from Cheryl of Gig Harbor. Cheryl, you're live on the call with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead, Cheryl.
Hello, thank you for taking my call.
Hi, Cheryl.
I'm curious what it's going to take to get the members of Congress back to Washington to work on this and have more votes or more solutions to vote on.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for that question, Cheryl. Democratic members of Congress were here this week. Republican members of Congress weren't. They were told not to show up. Votes were canceled. And we heard that in a Republican conference call this week, their leadership told them to not talk about healthcare because it's a losing position for them. It seems like they're avoiding this conversation, that they're not willing to negotiate because, I don't know, it's politically dangerous for them. I will say Senate Republicans and Democrats are here. They have been voting on the same two bills day after day. And there are no votes tomorrow because of Rosh Hashanah. But on Friday, members will return to vote again. Like I said, I talked to Senator Murray's team and Senator Cantwell, and they're staying in town. They'll be here to vote on Friday. That doesn't answer your question about when will folks be willing to negotiate. And I think Democrats have said over and over and over, Senator Murray and Representative DeLauro, who are our budget writers on the Democratic side, our leadership, Representative Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, they have said, we are willing to negotiate. We are willing to have a conversation. In fact, Leader Jeffries and Schumer asked the president for a meeting, and at first he agreed, and then he canceled and said the Democratic demands were silly and unserious. And then he had a meeting with them a couple days ago, but didn't allow any press in the room, which is really out of character for the president. But we keep showing up. My Democratic colleagues and our leadership keep showing up, willing to come to the table. We need the Senate and House Republicans to be willing to come to the table too.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next caller is Jean. Jean, you're live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead, Jean.
I'm very concerned for the democracy. I know that, I've been told that Social Security checks are still going to keep coming in, but I know that the president and his Republican supporters are literally trying to take down democracy and making great strides in doing that, sending federal troops into cities. I think Seattle is very likely to be next. And I would love to see the Democrats in Congress and the Democrats all over the country, with the help of there are plenty of people who would be willing to participate in actively opposing this strike against our Constitution and everything it holds dear. Is there any possibility for that kind of thing to happen?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question and for really voicing the concerns that so many of our neighbors are, feeling right now. I think there's a lot to be worried about, a lot of scary what feels like a fascist takeover of our government. Um, Troops in cities, as you mentioned, here in DC, in Los Angeles, threats on sending troops to Portland, to our south. Saw the meeting with Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, in which military leaders were brought forward and, told that they wanted the right kind of political beliefs. Trump said, if you don't like it, you can leave the room, if you're not going to applaud, but you can, kiss your position goodbye. I think this kind of threatening, hostile takeover of our government and our communities is really scary and really dangerous. I'm going to tell you about some of the things that we are doing and then talk about, what else we can do. Democrats don't have standing in court to sue the executive branch, to sue the president without Republican leaders, namely the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader, signing off to that sort of lawsuit. And when I was in Olympia in the state legislature, we sued Governor Inslee twice in my time there, and it was a four corners lawsuit. The legislature, both House and Senate Republicans and Democrats, agreed that the governor had overextended his executive authority. And it's not because I didn't necessarily agree with the governor's policies. This is separate from that. This was about a separate co-equal branch of government, the legislative branch, determining that the executive had overreached, extended beyond his constitutional authority. And that's the kind of thing that we should be seeing now. We should be seeing Congress sue the executive branch because they have overreached. But House Republicans and Senate Republicans seem very willing to just rubber stamp executive action. And in fact, I've heard some of my Republican colleagues in committee say it's our job to carry out the wishes and priorities of this president. And that is sad and scary to me. But while we can't sue as Congress, Democratic members of Congress have been working hand in hand with organizations that do have standing to sue this administration, with labor unions and organizations like the ACLU and HRC, with Democratic attorneys general. Our own AG Nick Brown has led multiple successful lawsuits against this administration. We also have been submitting amicus briefs in some of the lawsuits where our feedback and input is relevant and supportive. And there are victories in the courts. They don't usually get the same press coverage as a dangerous executive order or action does, but we are seeing victories in the courts. We are seeing them slow down some of this dangerous executive overreach. And usually Trump will just try to throw out something new and splashy and distracting so that folks are not paying attention to the fact that they're losing in the courts. But we also really are relying on community members. We're fighting in Congress, we're fighting in the courts, and we also have to fight in community. And, Speaker Pelosi reminded us the other day about the fight to protect the Affordable Care Act, to pass it originally and to protect it in Trump's first term, when they voted 17 times to try and repeal the Affordable Care Act. It was community members using their voices, telling their stories, writing letters to the editor, holding rallies and press conferences. It is community that really turns the tide. So, my call and ask to folks is make sure that you're using your voice, engaging your neighbors, whether you're knocking on doors or going to community events or writing letters to the editor or going on podcasts. And if there are folks in your life who live in other areas of the country besides Washington 6th, where their representatives aren't standing up and fighting for healthcare, call your friends and family and ask them if they're calling their members of Congress too, because all of our colleagues deserve to hear from their constituents how important it is to protect healthcare. And so if you know folks in Idaho or Texas or Florida, if you went to elementary school with people who live in some of these districts where they don't have a member of Congress standing up to fight for healthcare, call them, ask them to reach out to their Congress member and offer to practice the call or help them write a script if they're nervous about it, because all of our voices matter right now.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next question comes from Thomas. Thomas, you're live on the call with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead, Thomas.
Thanks for taking the call. I am a Coast Guard veteran, and I've just found out that the Coast Guard will be unpaid in this government shutdown. That happened several years ago, caused a huge problem for our guys who were standing the watch out there, who are saving lives, who are protecting our coast. What can you do to see to it that our guys get paid?
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for your service and for bringing up this issue. I'm also worried about the Coast Guard not being included in the protections that apply to other branches of the armed forces. That's why I've co-sponsored legislation to ensure that Coasties continue to receive their pay during a government shutdown. It's a national security issue, and our community really understands the importance of our Coast Guard stations, in Port Angeles and along the Pacific coast. I've heard a lot of colleagues talk about this, and I know there's some bipartisan, bicameral conversations happening, but we'll keep pushing to get this bill passed so that Coast Guard members, Coasties, can get that pay because they deserve it.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Russell of Port Orchard. Russell, you're live on the call with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead, Russell.
Thank you for taking my call. So I work at the shipyard, and I've got a lot of employees that are, younger families, and understand that eventually we're all going to get paid. But how are we going to take care of the folks that are working hard to make sure that we can defend our freedom with the late fees, the damage credit, and the lasting effects of the government shutdown? Because our elected officials, regardless of party, just can't seem to get it done.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for asking that on behalf of your employees. I certainly remember, being a kid when my dad was furloughed in the 95, 96 shutdown, and talked to neighbors at bars and in the grocery store and in community who, are facing this furlough and, late back pay. And we are working on introducing a bill, it should drop soon, to protect federal workers and families from foreclosure, evictions, loan defaults during a shutdown, as well as debt defaults. Federal workers and contractors, should be able to postpone payment obligations during a shutdown, and this legislation allows for that for during the shutdown and also 30 days afterwards to give a buffer to folks. I think it's the least we can do for federal workers who, are dedicated to making our government function, who, really want to work for the public, whether it's on our national security or Forest Service or any number of federal roles. And we should show up for them, for you and your workers too. So we're going to push that legislation to try and get it through. I do know that we have colleagues in the state legislature who are looking for creative solutions too, to see how they can help support federal workers who are furloughed during this shutdown. So we'll try to keep folks updated through our social media and newsletter about that progress too.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And again, folks, just as a reminder, if you have a question this evening, there's still plenty of time. Please press *3 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. And if you'd like to subscribe to the Congresswoman's e-newsletter, you can press *6 at any time during the call. And remember, if you're streaming, simply type your name and your question below the streaming player. So that's *3 to ask a question, *6 to subscribe to Congresswoman Randall's e-newsletter. And if you're streaming, please type your name and your question below the streaming player. Congresswoman, our next question comes from Richard of Gig Harbor. Richard, you're live on the call. Please go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Richard.
I think Julie from Bainbridge put the question out there earlier and was answered, and it was about healthcare and Medicare. And I just want to, Patty Murray and Maria. Tariffs. We've got so many things happening on so many fronts. So anyway, thank you for what you've done, and then could you address the tariff question?
Yeah, thank you. I hear from so many folks around the district, from business owners in Shelton and Port Angeles and Forks, from manufacturers in our district who are doing, it seems, what the president wants them to do, making American manufacturing great, that their business bottom line is really heavily impacted by increasing tariffs. They're having to make decisions about staffing and not being able to grow the way that they thought they would. They're, worried about layoffs and having to downsize and even being able to keep their businesses open. And, even if it's not goods that they're, selling or exporting, a lot of the equipment that manufacturing businesses use is produced internationally. And so they're having to pay tariffs on, those goods too. Absolutely. We should get them under control, and certainly not keep throwing fuel on the fire of a tariff war. There's been some bipartisan interest in Congress in taking back some of the control, but we haven't seen a willingness to really take action by Republicans in the House and the Senate. And so, we'll keep fighting. Maybe it'll end up being a part of this negotiation. Who knows if a negotiation will ever happen with Republican leadership? But I do believe that for the good of our country, for the ability for us to continue manufacturing, for the impact on families' budgets, we need to get these Trump tariff taxes under control, and we'll keep pushing for that.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Amy. Amy, you're live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead, Amy.
Hello. So I'm in Tacoma, Washington, and just want to say a big thanks for all you're doing with the town halls and social media and letting us be heard, as well as kind of explain what you're facing and how you're thinking about it. I'm a current USDA employee. I'm also currently furloughed. So I'm also interested, I really applaud the Democrats for sticking up to healthcare, but also interested in how you're thinking about how to protect the federal workforce, because it's been a really rough year. And whether there are any options to reinstate staff that were illegally fired, preventing further risk, and kind of the threat of the layoffs that's been whirling around, as well as kind of the threats to our merit-based civil service protections.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's really important. I've mentioned already a couple of policies that I've co-sponsored or that we're about to introduce to help protect federal workers. Um, there, there are a few others that we've introduced to help prevent firings, and co-sponsored bills to prevent firings and layoffs during shutdown. The Oversight Government Operations Subcommittee that I sit on focuses on federal workers, and we're using all of our tools, investigations, and um, letters to be a check and balance on the federal workforce. And we've fought pretty hard against the provisions that ended up getting stripped out of the big ugly bill HR1 that was passed in July, because there would have been even worse attacks on the federal workforce through that original policy. We're also seeing, and I'll point back again to successes in the courts, um, labor unions and employees, and uh, NGO organizations and attorneys general bringing lawsuits to protect federal workers who are being unlawfully fired. And many of the folks that I have talked to, federal workers and union reps and colleagues, echo my sentiments, which is, Russ Vogt from OMB and the president have sent out directives that agencies should prepare for mass firings during the government shutdown. And I'm worried about that. But we have seen mass firings and layoffs and deferred resignations throughout these last 9 months of this administration. We're seeing them extend beyond their constitutional authority, and they're getting challenged on it. And so, they're going to do it whether we're in a shutdown or not. And so we're negotiating for the healthcare protections that we can, but also showing up with amicus briefs, showing up to give information to organizations and agencies and individuals who are bringing lawsuits, and going to push for policy that protects our federal workforce, and continue building a case for policy that will go beyond the status quo, and that will continue to show the federal workforce that we value your civil service, that you make our government work more effectively, and that we believe that you are an important part of our country, and that we'll keep showing up for you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next question comes from Shirley. Shirley, you're live on the call with Congresswoman Randall. Please go ahead, Shirley.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this, Representative. I'm sorry. I'm nervous.
No, don't be nervous. I'm happy to have you.
So I guess, it's really hard because Trump doesn't follow the law. And it seems like the Supreme Court is doing everything that he wants them to do. They're seeming to favor him and not the law. So how can you fight something like that when the highest court takes actions that favor Trump and what he wants to do? I know you're doing a lot to the courts, and I think that's great, but I don't know what you can do when the Supreme Court is favoring all of his actions and doing what he wants them to do.
Yeah, Shirley, I think that's really important. I was at an event with a colleague today or yesterday who said, said this before I was elected, that we need real court reform at the Supreme Court level. We need an enforceable ethics code. Washington State has an independent ethics commission for our state Supreme Court, and I would love to see policy like that at the federal level. I'm also in favor of um, either term limits or adding seats to the Supreme Court. It's something that Congress has added Supreme Court seats before. This wouldn't be the first time. It wouldn't be revolutionary, but it would allow us to bring back balance to the highest court in the country. And I think we absolutely have to keep holding the Supreme Court accountable and pushing for real enforceable ethics codes, so that we don't have to worry about a Supreme Court that is unbalanced, that is always going to side with the right wing extreme Republicans in power. It is scary right now. I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I think we have more work to do, and I'm in it for the long haul.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And folks, as a reminder, if you're enjoying this update, I encourage you to subscribe to the Congresswoman's e-newsletter. Please press *6 on your telephone keypad to subscribe, but you may also subscribe online at randall.house.gov. Our next call is from Leah. Leah, you're live on the call with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead, Leah.
Well, the question I had originally...
Members off the job and detaining 2 of them. And, it took, for both of them, it took a while for their families, attorneys, and our casework team to track them down in the immigration database. They weren't showing up as where they were being detained. We wrote a letter. We had a ton of colleagues sign on to Secretary Noem. We haven't had any meaningful response yet, but we also introduced policy a week or so ago to reinstate the Biden era rules that said that immigration raids and enforcement action cannot take place at active emergency sites and emergency operations. That's what our community wants. That's what the American people deserve. They don't need Border Patrol or ICE showing up to, carry out an immigration raid when fire crew members are actively managing a fire that has grown from 9,000 acres to close to 20,000. It's a huge toll on our community, and we deserve those fire crew members to be able to work unimpeded. And so we've got some good support for that policy so far, and we'll keep pushing to ensure that they're protected. We also have been, as many of you have probably seen, and engaged in regular visits at the ICE detention facility in Tacoma, both coordinated with ICE and uncoordinated, unannounced visits. I've had a chance to speak to a number of detainees while there, and we'll continue visiting to ensure that folks are being treated fairly and lawfully, and that they have access to their attorneys, that they have healthcare access, that the rules and regulations are being upheld, and to let ICE know that they are not going to be able to behave however they want without our office and our community keeping an eye on them.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Pat. Pat, you're live with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead and ask your question, Pat.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Randall, for having this township. I have 2 questions. One, I live in Ocean Shores, and my nearest health care is in Aberdeen, Hoquiam, where we have 2 hospitals, basically. They are both handling high percentages of Medicaid patients. Are they going to close, or have you heard? My second question is, quite simply, can the Democrats get their message out better? I hear their message on places like MSNBC, but I don't hear it very much on the regular channel?
Thank you so much for that question. We have been in regular communication with, hospital leadership around the district, and no one is announcing that they are closing their doors right now. But they are telling us loud and clear that these Medicaid and Medicare cuts, as well as the Affordable Care Act enhanced premium tax credit cuts, will be dangerous for them because it will mean fewer people who show up at their doors have insurance coverage. And so, when folks show up to the emergency room, a hospital is going to treat them regardless of whether or not they have coverage because it's the law. And it's also the right thing to do. But when folks don't go to their primary care, don't go to the regular doctor, hold off because they're uninsured, their health crises get worse, and so their care is even more expensive at the emergency room. And emergency room care is more expensive than regular health care anyway. And that's going to drive up uncompensated costs for our hospitals and continue to put them at risk. As far as how we get the message out, I agree with you. I want us to be on more news channels and to have more coverage too. I didn't quite realize how much of this job was trying to get interviews. Just to be really honest, it is harder than it sounds to get booked on broadcast or cable TV news, on podcasts, on YouTube creators. All of us are really trying, and we're trying to get creative. And I'll say, like, the it's called the DPCC. It's sort of the policy and communication arm of the Democratic caucus. They've been working really hard to bring in more untraditional creators to, instead of the traditional news conference model, to bring in creators so that we can do interviews like around the room with different content creators. I bring that up because the reality is our media landscape is so much more fractured than it used to be. Like, the majority of people aren't getting their news from the same 5 to 7 nightly news programs anymore. They're getting their media from lifestyle creators and comedy podcasts and bloggers and YouTube streamers, all of this content that is fractured. And we saw a sort of breakdown of the left-right skew of some of this non-politics but politics adjacent lifestyle news, and like 75% of it skews right. So like the healthcare content creators, the comedy folks, the Joe Rogans of the world, that skews to the right. And so folks are getting more of a Republican messaging more than a Democratic messaging. We've also seen the consolidation of mainstream and traditional media where, fewer and fewer corporations own more and more of the channels and of the newspapers. So legacy media is also consolidating, and a lot of it, the ownership skews right as well. We will keep trying. We'll keep trying. I had 3 interviews today with local news. We're reaching out to local radio stations to do interviews in the car while I'm home. We're trying to be as many places as possible, and we'll continue trying. But if there are bloggers or creators or streamers that you think we should be engaging with, please always feel comfortable sending them our way. We'll always ask for an interview, and we gotta keep getting more flexible and trying to really deepen the message because it's important that folks know the truth.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question comes from Kimberly. Kimberly, you're live on the call. Please go ahead, Kimberly.
Hi, thanks for doing this call. This is great, Emily. I really appreciate it. So, my wife and I, we live in Bremerton. So obviously, we're really scared about what could happen with us, our marriage. I work for the city of Seattle, and she works for the shipyard. So, they're, currently not being paid, but, she's working. But, we're worried about our lifestyle and, what's going to happen, with our marriage and our safety. Obviously, that's a big one. So, we were kind of wondering, I know you're in the same situation. How are you feeling about that, as far as where we stand in our marriage and that?
Thanks for calling, Kimberly. It does feel really hard right now. It feels like our community, the LGBTQ community, and especially our trans neighbors, are being used as a political pawn by the right, to either distract from economic policy that they are pushing that is not good for regular people, or to fire up their base. It's appalling to me the kind of language that I hear from Republican colleagues on the House floor and in committee, as they talk about LGBTQ Americans. It's really gross and it's really painful, and no one should have to sit and listen to it. And it's obviously not just the words, it's also the actions and the policy. The policy that tries to erase us, that tries to limit trans neighbors' ability to go out in public and use bathrooms, that tries to take away the protections that we have fought for over the years and won after hard fights. It is really scary. We're seeing them